Welcome to the 81st episode of the New Ventures podcast. I'm your host, Sanjoy Sanyal, the founder of Regain Paradise, a boutique climate finance firm and a visiting fellow at the Cambridge Judge Business School. Along with my co-host, Professor Jaideep Prabhu, we try and understand the links between climate change and food security in these series of conversations.
Hi, I'm Jaideep Prabhu. I'm a professor of marketing at Cambridge Judge Business School, and my area of interest is innovation, more specifically frugal innovation, how to do more and better with less. And it is through that interest in frugal innovation that I've also developed an interest in food security and innovation in this space. I'm delighted to be doing this podcast with Sanjoy.
Our guest for today is Johan Mendez. We have previously hosted him on the 35th episode, which we released in 2022, and talked about nature-based adaptation. That was in the context of an adaptation-funded UNDP project. Today, we're going to talk about a global environmental facility-funded project, again in the Seychelles. It's called the Rich to the Reef approach for the integrated management of marine, coastal, and terrestrial ecosystems. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you, Sanjoy.
Johan, I know that Sanjoy knows you, but I'd love to know more about you and your work in the Seychelles.
I am a water restoration practitioner. I started with studying earth and universe science first, but then I had a master degree in geology and environment. And I came to work in Seychelles to do some research after spending 1 year in Canada, doing a master degree also in marine resources management. And so I wanted to really go deep into island system. So how to know a bit how they work as a whole and how studying the realities and the prospects around water resources. So this is how I came to the Seychelles, and I wanted to help also to do some things to help the country develop, because as you know, water is a silent pillar for the development.
Seychelles, obviously, many people associate this as a tropical paradise. So I'm going to try to ask you a cliched question. Is climate change trouble brewing in this paradise?
Well, I would say climate-related disaster rather than climate change issues nowadays, because we could go a bit on the different aspect of we could have a panoramic view of it. Let's start with the terrestrial aspect. So we have a lot of heavy rainfalls, but this is like since ever in this country, as it's on the equator. So those rainfalls cause a lot of floods and landslides. And those floods are exacerbated by human settlements, the drainage issues, mainly from a poor urban development design. And also those rainfalls could cause landslide. And those landslides mostly are exacerbated by also this human development, mainly by invasive alien species proliferation. Because when humans start to build, they start to destroy the natural environment, so they remove the forest system, and you have this proliferation of creepers, and those creepers goes around the urban areas on the forests, so they are in the interface between, and mainly they are above the urban areas. And when the landslide occurs because of the creepers, those creepers, they go over the trees and they kill the trees, so there is no root system holding on the land, and it's when the big rainfall occurs that you have the landslide occurring also. So we start to understand that after 20 years of having creepers invading those areas, now the landslides are coming, mostly because there is nothing holding the land anymore. Also, we have on the coastal areas, so this land erosion goes down to the coast, and it's polluting the marine life. So you add also, since 20 years of plastics and microplastics coming in, concentration of waste also sometimes, because we have some areas with animal waste, chemical waste. So this combined also with land reclamation for development, because Seychelles, the inner islands are really granitic, so very mountainous. So for the development of infrastructure, government, since 40 years, they started reclaiming the coastal areas, the reefs. And we lost around 1,600 hectares of coral reefs. And those corals used to produce sand, a lot of sand that would replenish the beaches. And so this is how I would say that the human development disrupted the coastal dynamics. And it's coming much more nowadays with the urban acceleration in the development. So, for example, the construction of pavements along the coastal roads that would destroy the root system of the coconut trees, for example, that would hold the sand dunes. And this is much more the beginning of the impact. And then if you add the coastal climate change issues, so to tidal surge movement, then at high tide you would lose the beaches there. And even nowadays, now with the climate change, so you have much more sea level rise. It's now the roads that are now threatened by climate change. So we have a combination of human impact and climate change induced impact, which is more global. So all this combined together, we could not only blame the climate change, but it's I would say it's not 50-50. It's 75% human induced and then 25% global climate change induced.
So, Johan, you're painting a really complex picture and really somewhat disturbing picture of how these things are coming together. All the activities of humans on the islands, so-called development affecting the marine life, the coast, but also the interaction with global climate change. Something that we are very interested on this podcast is food security. So how does all these climatic and human effects on the ecosystem affecting the food security of the Seychelles?
Okay, yeah. We have, like you say, it's a bit complex, yeah. And just to focus maybe more on the context around the food security, I would just introduce how the Seychelles economy works. So the main economic pillar is tourism. You have like 350,000 tourists on a good year coming to Seychelles for a population of 100,000 people. So it's the main pillar. And so for that, we have to import food, a lot of food for the tourism development to support the economic development of the hotels and mostly of the hotels. There's not much restaurant there, but it's a lot of hotels and 5-star hotels. So it's quite demanding on the quality of food. We import food, but we also import invasive species. And those invasive species affect the local food system. For example, by importing potatoes, onions, we could import, and this is what happened a few years ago, we imported a hairy caterpillar that invaded the fruit trees, the mango trees and many different trees. And so what had to be done, sometimes it's not a good solution. Or you cut the fruit trees to get rid of the hairy caterpillar because it was affecting also the people in terms of health issues. Or you have to spray. And by spraying with chemicals, like there was massive campaign of spraying in the different districts, it would not only affect the hairy caterpillar, but also the whole ecosystem around the insects, the birds, the spiders. So it started in chain reaction, I would say, in the ecosystem, where you lose the spider, then you have a proliferation of another kind of insect that would have another impacts even on the tourists themselves. They would complain, so they would have to spray in the hotels. So this would have also an impact on the quality of the water in the mangroves, so affecting also the different aspects there. But to go back on the food security, yeah, we have a lot of dependence on imports, especially since the year 2000, where you have a touristic development boom. It's a big concern because we don't have much federal reserve in the central bank to afford imports of goods. I think it was during COVID we had an issue about that because we only have a reserve for 3 months of importation.
So I just wanted to understand a bit better. You said, you import these invasive kinds of species, both sometimes vegetables like potatoes and onions, but also insects like the hairy caterpillar. I mean, wouldn't that happen anyway? No island is an island unto itself. How has, for instance, tourism affected or caused that? Wouldn't this kind of invasion happen naturally anyway, just by virtue of people, even if it wasn't large numbers of tourists?
Yeah, sure. No. The imports of goods, even if it was not for tourism, for local people, they need to import. And those hairy caterpillar, probably they came into the potatoes. This is what was found. And even with no tourists, yeah, it would have been imported. But if there was food security, like if the island was self-sustainable in terms of food production, they would not import that much. And so they would not have those biosecurity threats. This is what happened really. But yeah, the tourism part make it that they have to import much more products in the country.
I got it. I understand. So what would have the traditional foods been, and how, let's say in earlier times when it didn't have such a big tourist economy, how would the Seychelles have managed its food security? What are the traditional crops? What's happened to those crops? Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Yes. So Seychelles independence is the year 77. And before it was a British colony. And there was a law, so dated from that time, that would oblige a landowner to plant those trees called breadfruit. And the Breadfruit Tree Act, which is still in place today, so would oblige you to have food security by planting food trees. And those trees were protected under the law, so you could not cut them. And especially it was put in place during the Second World War because there was a kind of issues of approvisionment to supply food to the island, because the island is 1,000 kilometers away from Somalia coast, so it's far from the mainland. And so this was put in place already in the year 50s, 40s, 50s in the country to secure. And so it was the traditional food, the breadfruits, the root crops like cassava, sweet potatoes, always been the local food there. And what happened is that with the development and coming with the tourism, like tourists come to Seychelles, they prefer to eat their own food from the continent. So like chicken and chips, burgers, and like we could say continental food. So Seychelles people nowadays prefer to go, like the young generation, the new generation prefer go on imported food also. So there is more demand now on we could say junk food. If you look globally, Seychelles is first in Africa in terms of obesity rate in the population. And so now we have a public health concern with the food also.
My God, that seems like another big problem to deal with. And when you mentioned breadfruit, I've had breadfruit. It's a wonderful fruit and it's a great staple as well, I believe. It's really sad to hear that these traditional diets have now been under pressure from what we might call globalization, and that's causing a public health crisis like in many other parts of the world. Really, really sad.
Yes, it's a concern now, and the Ministry of Health is trying to tackle this with a national campaign against obesity, because it's a real issue since many years, but now it's a real concern. So trying to make people eat more local food, and also doing sports like go on jogging and doing some activities, because the way of life has changed more from being fishermen and working the land to work for services, so working in offices, in air-conditioned building. There's a lot of cars also now in Seychelles. We have, if you look at the plate numbers, we are at 40,000 cars for 100,000 people. It's a lot of development, and so it's affecting, like you say, the public health. All in this together, it's a big issue coming in, and we need to address this. And if you look at those issues, they are all in together, and by solving one by one, we recreate a virtual cycle. And this all started during the COVID.
What do you mean by it started during the COVID pandemic?
Well, what happened during the COVID is that when COVID hit the country, the airport had to close. And so the country was financially shut down, because the first pillar I was saying was the tourism. So there was no income of Forex in the country. And like I was saying, the central bank, which is the institution in charge of managing the reserve in the country to guarantee imports of goods and services, had only reserve for 2 months of imports. There was, during COVID also, there was a whole disruption in the cargo shipments. So there was a big delay also to get goods to the country. It was an eye-opener for the government and also for the local people to now focus more on the local farmer to get the food. And so the farmers were really looked at like essential workers, and because there was no more inflow of foreign exchange, and also the international commodity price was raising. It was a real concern, and people were starting to go back to their culture, like the breadfruit. it was a good lesson. And also the value of the money, the Seychelles rupee, the value dropped a lot because there was the demand on the dollar was very high. It's the biggest GDP in Africa. So they used to order a lot of things online, like on services, like shopping online for clothes. And so the central bank has to do a press conference to tell to the people of Seychelles, look, guys, you have to stop shop online because we have to keep the forex for the food. So, but it worked very well because it's a very small population and it's easy to shift paradigm and also to shift conscience of people also to change behavior.
And in that context, can you please explain to us what is the ridge to rift?
So the concept of ridge to rift, just to explain a bit, is that you address the island as a whole system. So when you integrate the mountain, from the mountain, the top of the mountain, which is the ridge, to the reef, which is the lowest level of the island in the sea. So it's a bit like from the source to the sea. So you have to globalize the picture of the island to target, because if you want to target environmental degradation as a whole, you have to start from the upland areas, because the upland areas, when you have those heavy rains, everything flows down to the coastal ecosystem. And so when you have those land-based pollution, degradation, erosion, the landslide, everything goes down, and it would end up in the coral reefs, if there is still coral reef, but in the marine environment in general. And so this would impact the health and resiliency of the marine life, which is also a big part of the food security in Seychelles, because our protein comes mainly from the sea. For example, you can have a picture of the country when it's raining. The whole Bay of Victoria, which is the capital city, the sea is becoming red because there's a lot of development. And when you do development, you scrap the topsoil to do your foundation works. And when you expose that to the rain, everything goes down and you have mud going down and covering the whole marine ecosystem. So the concept is to work on the top, and if you fix the top, then the bottom is getting cleaner. So this is the concept of the approach of the ridge to rift. And so what we have in the top in the station is mainly forests and agricultural systems. The project is focused more on arrests and reversed ecosystem degradation in the altitude, to have an integrated, which is what we call integrated management, so of marine, coastal, and terrestrial ecosystem. So this was done to address the priorities of land degradation into the sea.
So what are the main activities of this project, Johan? And does it cover all the islands of the Seychelles?
No, the project was just covering the inner islands. So they have, because it's a GF-funded project, so they could not cover the nationally. They had to choose, I would say, demonstration sites. But it was very disparate in the three main islands, so which is Mahé, Pralin, and La Digue Island. And the objectives, so there was three components in the project. It was to expand the marine and terrestrial protected areas. There was some consultation with the government institutions to choose which area to focus on. And the second component was to strengthen the management of the key biodiversity areas. So there was some previous work done before to map which area hosts is the most, I would say, critically endangered, where you have endemic species to protect. So the second component of the project was to focus on those areas and the adjacent areas to enhance the flow of ecosystems through this ridge to rift approach, but also to have an eye on endemic biodiversity, because those islands are really fragile and they host a lot of endemic species which are only found there. And sometimes they're only found in certain region of those islands. They're not the same on Pralin Island, and on Mahé Island it's different endemic. So, and the third component was to manage the knowledge, to share knowledge in between the different stakeholders to understand, because sometimes you have to work with agricultural people, sometimes with forestry, national park, forest firefighters, which are completely different people. So there's a strong component about knowledge management, also ecosystem health monitoring. For example, water tests in the rivers to have a comparison about the ecosystem health, what is a good water quality, what is not a good water quality. So the project intended to build capacity on that also, and to have coordination in between the different bodies.
Yes, it does sound very complex. I have a kind of simple question. How do you stop all this erosion? Because it seems like you're fighting against very big and complex forces. You would have to stop construction. You can't stop the rains, obviously. So are you able to reverse this process of getting the Victoria Bay, preventing Victoria Bay from growing red in the monsoon season? Can that actually be done?
Yes, we had to start on different aspects. So we had some concrete solution, like practical solution to prevent land erosion from previous project and from indigenous knowledge. And also we had to do some work with communities. We had some regional sites that we could not change. So there was selection of agricultural areas and also from a lot of different also key KBAs, the key biodiversity areas. And so we worked to improve the land cover by encouraging farmers to do agroforestry, to expand it on degraded upland sites. We have degraded sites that needs to be restored, but we also have abandoned land which need to be regenerated because they are covered with creepers. Like I was in the introduction, I was saying that the creepers over a long period of time, they disrupt the stability of the soil. And when you have those big rain, then you think it's the rain who created the landslide, but in fact it's a long-term. The idea to stop it was to do some sustainable land management approach with the farmers. A lot of that, and also to do some regenerative work on area affected by forest fires. So post-fire rehabilitation works also. Mainly those were the main activities to reverse land degradation from erosion.
And you are actually working with the farmers on the sustainable land management.
Yes, true that. So on the farmers' side, we were focusing more on the small traditional farms, like small scale farm, less than 2 hectares. And it all started with training of farmers. So we had a call for training to the farmers interested. Of course, we would not oblige all the farmers to come and to adopt what we were preaching. So we had different trainings under the project. We had a beekeeping training. We had a biopesticide training, composting training, mulching training, passive irrigation training, which I was involved in. So how to explain to the farmers to shift their agricultural practices more to farm like the forest. Because one of the things we were explaining to them is like, if you look at the forest, especially in Seychelles, it's always green. Nobody plow the soil, nobody irrigates, and everything is blooming all the time. So just to explain more to farmers on how nature works and how to work with nature to produce what you want to produce. And from that, after those trainings, the farmers who were interested to have support, we made them fill a form. And after that, the project was willing to support like 50 farmers on their own farm. So we had a budget per farm. So then it was more on a case by case because each farm have different issues to be solved. But the project was to really give a push to the farmers who wanted to go in the right direction. And so the work was mainly to do first analysis of each farm, see what's their main issues. They are facing water supply issues, drainage issues after heavy rainfall, or if it was more, I would say, the farmers would say to us what is their main issue they are facing. If it was robberies, working issue, they don't have enough workforce, things like that. So we were collecting a lot of also information from the farmers to adapt the response and also to see, prioritize what are the issues and if they are interested to shift their farming practices into more organic ways. Also studying their own irrigation system if they need support on that and see what their needs were in terms of organic supplies. For example, if they need inputs of seaweeds, we could help them, like give them 2, 3, 5 pickup trucks of seaweeds to have the good organic inputs. Could be coconut husk, it could be terracing also. So we could sponsor them 1 or 2 days of excavator to redesign the land terraces, so to avoid land erosion. Also soil protection with the mulching practices. Even at some point we sponsor them. Few of them, they had a mulching machine, so it's a wood chipper. So you can chip your own wood and have your own soil coverage. And also we did some training on Ugelkultur. So Ugelkultur, it's a German origin name. It's mostly for regenerate the soil more quickly. So you bury wood and you do it a bit like when you are cooking lasagna. You put the big wood in the bottom, then you put the smaller wood on top, Then you add a layer of chicken manure, green grasses. Then you put some seaweed. You can put some wood hashes. So you put everything. You put your amendments to the soil. Then you cover it with compost and topsoil. And then you mulch it. You put mulch on top of it. Then you don't have to touch it anymore. You create a kind of big mound on your land. And you can create several beds like that. So you have a kind of wavy surface on your farm. So it breaks the wind. So you have less evaporation. So you need also less irrigation. And because you have buried wood, the wood would degrade in during many years. It could last 10 to 20 years, depending on the size of the wood you've put there. So you don't have to plow again. And so it's very easy then you just have to maintain a mulch cover so you don't have the grass going there, and then you just put your favorites, and you don't have to irrigate because the degrading wood became like a sponge, and so you recreate a forest ecosystem in your farm where you don't have to add fertilizers, you don't have to work the land like the conventional way.
So, Johan, you mentioned organic food. What types of organic food are you working with the farmers to introduce? Are you also getting them to go back to more traditional diets? Could you tell us a bit about that?
So yeah, we work with the farmers on what they are typically growing. We provide them with trees for the ones who are interested in expanding agroforestry practices. So we give them all the local fruit trees available. But most of them, the ones that I have surveyed, they already grow the traditional food here. It's pumpkins, sweet potatoes, cassava. Sweet potatoes and cassava doesn't require much irrigation and work. So it's because they are affected by the water supply, they don't have much access to infrastructure support. They grow what is really easy to grow, which traditionally is the sweet potato and the cassava. But by giving them tips and advice on how to improve their farm, they now diversify their products, and they do much more like chilies, lettuce, cucumber, tomatoes. This is the local, what you find in the local market with banana, papayas, and eggplants. So those are the local food that you find everywhere.
I'm trying to get a sense of the nature of these farmers. I mean, in the sense that you mentioned Seychelles is a rich country certainly by African and maybe South Asian standards. These farmers are not subsistence farmers, but are they industrial farmers? Can you give us a sense of how big their land holdings are, whether they're doing this mainly for subsistence or it's part of they're generating substantial income? That would be interesting.
Yes, most of the farmers that we work with, they have a small farm, less than 1 hectare. Mostly they are seniors, but we have a lot of youth farmers also coming in the business. Those they want to produce for the hotels, but we see different kind of, because you have the old school farmer, which is nowadays like a senior one, like 60 years old around. He doesn't really want to change his behavior into really organic, because they have those 40 years of doing conventional agriculture. Is very hard to change in 1 or 2 months. But they are really also knowledgeable in terms of traditional knowledge from their parents and grandparents. So they don't really depend also a lot on machineries. And because of the terrain also in Seychelles, it's a lot of valley hills side. So you cannot really have industrial agriculture. It's mostly small scale, and with low income farmers. Yeah. Usually they work every day from Monday to Friday, and on Saturday they go in the central market in Victoria to sell their products. Some of the business farmers, we have maybe less than 10 ones. They are like, we could say big business for Seychelles, but it's still small compared to continental farms. They produce a lot, and they produce for the hotels. Those ones, yeah, like, yeah, some of them are big farmers, but most of them are small scale farmers with a little bit of animals here and there to produce their own manure. So this is the traditional way. They used to have 1 cow or 2 cows per farm, and this is how they still go on. But the land degradation going on and on, they see that they cannot produce the same as before. So this is where they really welcome the project.
Why organic? I mean, if they're small farmers and they have to increase yield, why are you influencing them to go organic? I can understand effective water management. I can understand, soil management that prevents erosion. But this organic thing is a bit puzzling to me.
There's many different reasons why going organic. Mostly when we ask them first, is that most of them it's because of health reasons. Those farmers, they are food producers and they want to produce good food. Nowadays, they are well informed. They know that the chemicals are affecting the quality of the food, which is affecting the quality of the health of the people eating the food. And also, they are also a small community. And retired farmers are really affected also by cancers because they were using conventional chemicals without proper protection. And a lot of them died because of sudden cancers, and they could not really explain that. So we explained to them also the risk they have to use excessive chemicals. And so the organic food is also on that aspect. They are more interested in going to that. Also case by case, and some of them are more willing to go organic than other ones. Because it's a facility also. It's easy to go on chemicals. If you want to get rid of the grasses, you just spray the Roundup and then it all die the day after. We really promote the organic way because if you want to reduce workload, like I was explaining the Ugel Kultur concept, where you add the wood, you add the organic inputs, then it's nature working. But if you add chemicals to those, if you don't go organic, you disrupt the natural function of the soil. And then you really need to depend on the chemical inputs. And those chemical inputs need also to be imported. And nowadays, so during COVID, we had issues to import goods, but still today we have issues for cargo shipment to the Seychelles. In the Red Sea, you have external factors that makes that you cannot get stocks in time in agricultural store. So sometimes you don't get the chemicals. So you are disturbed also in your production plan because you depend also on imports there. So by also promoting organic agriculture, you promote them also to source locally their own inputs. And this is also helping the farmer to work the land naturally. Then the soil is working with the mushrooms, the bacteria. And when you add chemicals, you just disrupt. When you plow the land, also you disrupt the mushroom network that would decompose the organic matter and work for the farmer.
And what about the seeds, Johan? Are those also imported, or do you have indigenous seed banks and stock?
Actually, the seeds are imported. The agricultural store, which depend on the Ministry of Agriculture, so they bring in seeds from overseas, which are treated. So they are already chemically coated to prevent intrusion also of invasives. So they depend mostly on imported seeds, to produce watermelon, I would say the cash crops. Aside from that, you have all the local pumpkins, which grows very easily, but are not really the seed banks. It's not a concept that is in mind of the farmers in Seychelles. They don't really keep the seeds for later. They would rather go to the store and buy the seeds, or they go and see what's the new set of seeds coming in the country. They would rely on what the Department of Agriculture would select for them.
You mentioned this earlier, Johan, that not all farmers were interested in these new practices. If you could paint for us the picture of what difficulties you faced in helping farmers adapt these new practices.
Yes, sure. It's really hard to change their mindset because a farmer in Seychelles, I don't know in other parts, but in Seychelles, they would not really adopt agroecological practices such as we were training them on. They would prefer old methods like plowing, burning the vegetation, the unwanted vegetation. Instead of burying the vegetation, they would burn it. The resource, the carbon resource that should go as organic matter in the soil, they would burn it in the air and maybe use the ashes. We were explaining to them the ashes it's a good input for the soil, but at some point it could be bad if it's too much because it disrupts also the pH level of the soil. So you have also to bring in some scientific knowledge to the farmers. They don't read books, they really go straight forward. So they have their knowledge, but sometimes their knowledge could be wrong. I mean, plowing the land, burning everything. And then they rely on inputs. They have to buy the inputs from the store, which are imported chemicals. The paradigm shift is very hard, especially on the older generation by saying new things like that. And the other barriers also is the extension officers. Even in the Ministry of Agriculture, those guys would promote the Roundup they just imported. They would go to the farm and say to the farmer, look, you cannot keep the grass going like that. You have to keep your farm clean, like a golf course. They would prefer the farm to be clean, tidy, than to have kind of natural way where you keep the, like we say, the bad grass growing and you can feed the cows with, or you can bury it after. They would encourage the farmers to go to the store and buy the Roundup, so to make it clean. And so to keep the soil bare and then exposed to erosion. So it's a whole mentality change, even in the Department of Agriculture. So sometimes you are fighting against one thing, but slowly with demonstration, we really had some good results.
So I see you have done a lot of engagement with the farmers on so many different levels in so many different areas. So the scope of what you're doing is quite broad, and there seems to be a lot of deep engagement as well with a lot of smaller farmers. How do you manage to scale that, and what are the costs involved? Are there ways that you can replicate this that are also cost effective?
Yes, in fact, we've been doing some door to door also with the hotels businesses to try to support the increase in the quality of the food production. We have a big hotel in Seychelles that is really one of its policies to really support the local food producers, and by also getting training in how to train them to go more agroecological in their practices, because they want their customer also to eat good food. I'm talking about 5-star hotels, so they are willing to pay a bit more to get quality. So we've been able to select some farmers association that are really willing to shift into more organical way, even if sometimes you still have to fight against some invasive. Sometimes it's not easy also to say to a farmer, look, you have to stop using all the chemicals, because sometimes you are already affected with invasive species, you don't have much choice. But to reduce, at least step by step, the use of chemicals and the dependence on them. And so we have some hotels that are really willing to work, especially with some associations, and they give them good price. So they are willing to pay a bit more than the market price for a good product. And they do that for a whole list of products. And they are also willing to open to local varieties of food, like the breadfruit and all these kind of food. So it's very engaging to upscale that. Poor farmer can now get a good revenue, like $1,500 per month, if he's producing nearby 1 ton fruit and vegetables. It's a good revenue for our farmers, and so it's slowly the farmers want to go into that. But we don't have organic labeling for now in the country. We are now in the stage of training people to do this participatory guarantee system where you can have more guarantee on the organic production. Like I was explaining, you need to import wood from other sites. And we have a big issue in Seychelles, the issue of waste. We have a big landfill where all the waste go there. It could be fish waste, because we have a lot of fish industries. It could be vegetation waste, so green waste. And we have now coming to a point where in the coming years, we're going to ban to put green waste on the landfill. And so we want to have some projects, including the farmers, where you could have, let's say in the farming area, a green waste site where the hotels, which are doing landscaping, a lot of landscaping in the hotels, they have a lot of leaves, of green grasses. This has to go back to the farm to do this Ugel culture bed, so where you can feed the soil with organic matter. So this is the next step we are looking into, and this is coming also with a new set of program with the GEF UNDP project. So I think it's going to start as of next year, but it's a policy change also that needs to be done nationally to really oblige people to not consider green waste as a waste, but as a green gold. In fact, there's another aspect that the project is implementing now. It's the development of agrotourism, so that you can bring the tourists on the farm, they can consume a local juice and also see how you produce the food locally and enjoy the product on the farm. So it could be local juice, honey. The Seychelles honey is really well rated internationally because it's a good quality honey. And you have also vanilla, cinnamon. One of the best cinnamon also in the world is found in Seychelles. And so there's a lot of value added product that can be done for the farmers. And also this will increase also on the quality of the food production.
So you essentially engage a lot of partners to help you to do this work. The hotels and the tourists themselves are like your levers that you can have a multiplicative effect with. That seems to me what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. Use the tourism lever to level up the standards of food production in the country. Exactly, yeah.
And I'm also remembering the podcast that we did 2 years back, and that was on the issue of water and also the issue of preventing forest fires and helping people manage water more effectively. Is there some links between that project that you did then and this project?
Yes, there was the link. It was really this Rich to Reef project is a continuation of the EBA project, the ecosystem-based adaptation, in a way that we go much more on the farm site itself. So we do replicate what was done at the landscape level, but decentralized on the farm side. So it was really on a case by case replicating the land contours. So when the rain, you could keep the water on the farm itself. So instead of creating erosion, it creates more replenishment of the soil with water. So building a soil sponge and also building some small ponds, depending on the terrain of each farm, how it could be done. It has been done, some small dew ponds where the farmer is self-sustaining its own water supply. So it doesn't really depend on the river supply, on the public network. And it's really been, I would say, very encouraging because the government is now using those projects as an example to give people hope really on what would be the future of agriculture in the country. So it's really encouraging. But in the same time, the mindset, like I was saying, even in the Department of Agriculture needs to change. The whole approach needs to change. And this is the biggest challenge.
Yes, there was an ecotourism aspect to that project as well, which seems to be link up with what you're saying here.
Yeah, there's the one site which is a good example of what has been achieved is the Belazar community. There is an association there of water users. They are mainly farmers, but not only. And so they joined together as water users association, and the government gave them. So they signed that 1 year ago. The project site that the adaptation fund did with the water retention landscape, they build also agroforestry regenerative site just aside from there. And it's a public area, so even if you go to Seychelles, you could visit it. It's now found on Google Maps. It's called Dansos Wetland. It's in the Belazar watershed. You can go there. They had some sponsoring of bench, picnic tables, and now they are creating in this pilot agroforestry site, which is a community-led piece of land that the state owned, but they hand it over to the community. And the community is now planting there. So each farmers bring their own fruit tree seeds. They have, for example, I have this special mango that we don't find really often. So I would bring my mango tree there. You have the baobab trees. Everyone bring its own piece of fruit there. It could be a lychee tree. So this area is 2 hectares. It's to have a conservatory of those local fruit trees. And since COVID, it's now really easy to explain to the people that something can happen very fast and the island could be separated from trades. And so you have to sustain what you have locally. And the area is classified now as a community food forest, which act as a seed bank for the future. So we have all kinds of endemic also palms there. And they have planted coffee with the help of children. Also, the school children comes there to learn about Google and to plant themselves their own trees. So they can also, the school adopted some of the sites to take care of the trees and learn how to do agroforestry. And you can find vanilla, cinnamon, nutmeg. So all the spices that you find in Seychelles, the fruit trees and also the medicinal trees are being planted there.
So, Johan, this has been wonderful speaking to you. Do you have any questions for us?
Much question, but just suggestion for you guys is to get some sponsoring and come to Seychelles to to maybe document local people there. You can interview them also, because my job is more international, but you would love to interview the locals also, to have their point of view.
I think I would more than happily take up that offer of going to Seychelles and speaking to people and interviewing them and creating a sort of audio visual of what you are doing. Actually, Jaideep, that gives us perhaps an idea that, we probably should get in a proper media angle to this series of podcasts.
Absolutely, Sanjoy. I mean, Johan, that's a wonderful thought. And I could immediately see myself being there, not least to enjoy the amazing natural beauty, but also some of the foods that you have described, particularly the breadfruit and the cassava. So, it's a great idea. And there's no better way I have found in my research to really understanding an issue than going to the place and talking to the people who are involved with both the challenges and also the solutions. So thank you for that suggestion, Sanjoy, and I will definitely think about what we could do in that context.
And if people want to get in touch with you, Johan, how should they?
Well, they could get in touch with me via email. They could contact the Belazar Watershed Committee. They have Instagram, so Belazar Watershed, and also on Facebook. They have a Facebook page. So this is the community-based organization which is doing wonderful work over there. And they could get in touch also with what the project has been doing there. Really, it's amazing. You could see also pictures and how their work is inspiring. So Belazar, it's B-A-I-E. Then Lazare, it's L-A-Z-A-R-E. This is the name of the district, and this is the name of the river that has been chosen by the previous projects. So they have done a lot of rehabilitation. So Belazar, and then Watershed Committee.
And with that, thank you very much, Johan. This has been wonderful speaking to you. I mean, it's again, obviously, great to reconnect as well after 2 years. And thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing, the most vulnerable of areas.
Thank you so much, Johan. It has indeed been a pleasure. We learned so much from talking to you on this podcast.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure shared with me.
If you like this podcast, do visit us on regainparadise.org, regainparadise.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and you can also subscribe to these podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Google, Apple, and YouTube.